Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood in that Multnomah County courtroom, watching my billionaire father Harrison smirk as he tried to steal my dead mother's bakery through forged documents. The judge looked skeptical when Harrison's lawyer claimed I couldn't afford proper representation. Then Harrison leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're too poor to hire a lawyer." Pathetic. The entire courtroom erupted in cruel laughter. Spectators whispered and pointed at me like I was some charity case. My face burned with humiliation as I clutched my worn briefcase. But when I stood up to speak, my first sentence changed everything. "Your Honor, I am Cedric Williams, Harvard Law School graduate." The silence that followed my declaration gave me a moment to collect my thoughts. 3 years had passed since I lost the most important person in my world. My mother, Elena, had been everything to me after my father abandoned us when I was 12 years old. She built Sweet Dreams Bakery from absolutely nothing, transforming a rundown storefront in Southeast Portland into the neighborhood's heart and soul. Elena worked 16 brutal hours every day, her hands permanently stained with flour and sugar, her back aching from lifting heavy bags of ingredients. She never complained, not once. While other single mothers struggled to make ends meet, my mother created something magical. Sweet Dreams became more than a business. It became a sanctuary where lonely elderly people found companionship, where struggling families discovered affordable comfort food, where neighborhood children received free cookies and gentle encouragement with their homework. I remember coming home from school to find Elena teaching Mrs. Dorothy Thompson how to knead bread dough. Dorothy had lost her husband of 47 years and spent most days wandering the neighborhood aimlessly. Elena would patiently show her the same technique week after week, never showing frustration when Dorothy forgot the measurements or mixed up the steps. Those bread-making sessions gave Dorothy purpose and Elena friendship. Young Tommy Garcia became another regular fixture. His parents worked double shifts at the textile factory, leaving him alone most afternoons. Tommy would push through our front door around 3:30, backpack heavy with textbooks, homework, crumpled in his small fists. Elena would set him up at the corner table with chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven and help him struggle through multiplication tables or reading comprehension while customers chatted quietly around them. The Martinez family celebrated every birthday anniversary and graduation at Sweet Dreams. Elena memorized their preferences without being asked. She knew that grandfather Miguel preferred his coffee black and bitter, that teenage daughter Sophia was allergic to nuts, that little Carlos always wanted extra frosting roses on his slice of cake. When Miguel had his heart attack, Elena delivered meals to their house for 3 weeks, refusing any payment and insisting it was what neighbors did for each other. Elena saved every penny she could scrape together to put me through college and law school. She sold her only valuable possession, her mother's wedding ring, to pay for my LSAT prep courses. She worked through pneumonia during my second year at Harvard because missing even one day meant losing revenue we couldn't afford to lose. When I graduated summa cum laude and received multiple job offers from prestigious Boston law firms, Elena cried tears of pride and relief. But she made me promise something that changed the course of my life. "Cedric," she said, holding my diploma with trembling hands, "don't chase money like your father did. Follow your heart. Create something meaningful. Make the world a little better." I honored that promise by returning to Portland to help run Sweet Dreams while slowly building a small legal practice focused on helping local business owners navigate regulations and contracts. The bakery became our shared dream. Elena taught me every recipe she had perfected over the years. I learned how her cinnamon rolls required exactly 18 minutes in the oven, how her sourdough starter needed daily feeding like a pet, how her secret chocolate cake ingredient was a tablespoon of strong coffee that enhanced the cocoa without making the cake taste like coffee. We worked side by side, her experienced hands guiding mine, her patient voice explaining techniques that took years to master. When Elena received her pancreatic cancer diagnosis, we both knew time was running short. Instead of wallowing in despair, she threw herself into creating a comprehensive business succession plan. We spent her final months updating inventory systems, documenting supplier relationships, and recording video tutorials for her most complex recipes. Elena wanted to ensure Sweet Dreams would survive and thrive long after she was gone. Elena legally transferred complete ownership to me through a detailed will that took 6 weeks to prepare. Our longtime family lawyer, Marcus Webb, witnessed every signature, every initial, every notarization. Elena's mind remained sharp throughout the process, despite her physical decline. She questioned every clause, suggested modifications, and insisted on backup plans for various scenarios. Marcus later told me he had never worked with a more thorough or competent testator. Elena died on a rainy Tuesday morning in March, holding my hand in the small apartment above the bakery, where we had shared so many conversations about life dreams and the importance of treating every customer like family. Her final words were about the bakery's future, about continuing her tradition of community service, about never letting anyone convince me that small acts of kindness were insignificant. For 18 months after her death, I successfully ran Sweet Dreams while building my legal practice. The bakery thrived under my management. Regular customers appreciated the continuity of familiar recipes and welcoming atmosphere. New customers discovered us through word-of-mouth recommendations and online reviews praising our authentic community feel. I felt proud knowing Elena would approve of how I was honoring her legacy. My small legal practice focused on helping other small business owners deal with licensing issues, contract disputes, and regulatory compliance. I charged reasonable fees because I understood the financial pressures facing independent entrepreneurs. Many clients paid in trade rather than cash, bringing fresh produce, handmade crafts, or professional services in exchange for legal advice. It felt like the right way to practice law, serving my community rather than maximizing billable hours. But 6 weeks ago, my peaceful world exploded when Harrison appeared at Sweet Dreams for the first time in 16 years. He arrived with an entourage of expensive lawyers dressed in a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. He walked through the bakery like he owned it, examining our equipment with obvious disdain, commenting to his associates about the property's commercial development potential. Harrison claimed Elena had secretly signed a document during her final illness, giving him rightful ownership of the building and land. He produced what appeared to be Elena's signature on a backdated transfer deed, alleging she had been mentally incompetent when she wrote her will, leaving everything to me. He demanded I vacate immediately or face legal eviction proceedings. The document looked convincing at first glance. It contained Elena's full legal name, the property's correct address, and what seemed to be her distinctive signature. But something felt wrong immediately. Elena had never mentioned any contact with Harrison during her illness. She had been clear about wanting him to have no involvement in her affairs or mine. The timing made no sense, and the language didn't sound like anything Elena would ever say or sign. Harrison's return shattered my sense of security and threatened everything Elena had worked to build. After 16 years of complete abandonment, he suddenly wanted to claim ownership of her life's work. The timing was suspicious, coming exactly 18 months after Elena's death, when he had clearly researched the probate process and identified the optimal moment to challenge my inheritance. I tried reasoning with Harrison, initially hoping family bonds might still exist beneath his cold exterior. I invited him to the bakery's back office, the same cramped space where Elena and I had planned the business's future during her final months. The walls were covered with her handwritten recipe cards, supplier contact lists, and customer birthday reminders that showed how much she cared about every detail of Sweet Dreams operations. Harrison examined Elena's medical records with clinical detachment, dismissing clear documentation of her mental competency throughout her illness. Dr. Angela Foster had noted Elena's sharp cognitive function in every appointment summary. Elena had discussed complex treatment options, intelligently made informed decisions about pain management, and maintained detailed conversations about business operations until days before her death. "You manipulated a dying woman," Harrison said coldly, not looking up from the medical files. "Elena was vulnerable, probably confused from medication, and you took advantage of her condition to secure valuable real estate for yourself." I showed Harrison the detailed succession planning documents Elena and I had created together. We had spent weeks developing comprehensive business continuity plans, updating supplier contracts, and documenting operational procedures. These weren't the actions of someone mentally impaired or coerced. They demonstrated Elena's careful attention to preserving Sweet Dream's community role and ensuring its financial stability. Harrison walked through the bakery like he was surveying property for demolition. He paced off dimensions, examined the kitchen equipment, and made notes about structural modifications. "This little hobby shop isn't worth my time," he sneered, gesturing dismissively at Elena's carefully arranged display cases. "But the land underneath is prime commercial real estate. I'm developing a luxury shopping complex here that will actually contribute something meaningful to Portland's economy." His words felt like physical blows. Elena had poured her soul into creating a business that served her community with integrity and compassion. She had built relationships spanning decades, supported struggling families through difficult times, and created a gathering place where people found comfort and connection. Harrison saw only dollar signs and development opportunities. Harrison's lead attorney, Margaret Stone, arrived the next day with intimidating legal documents. She represented Stone Richards and Associates, one of Portland's most prestigious and expensive law firms. Stone was known for aggressive tactics and overwhelming opponents with complex procedural maneuvers rather than focusing on legal merits. "Stone served me with a lawsuit demanding immediate possession of Sweet Dream's property. The legal paperwork was deliberately complex and intimidating, filled with technical property law citations and threatening language designed to confuse and frighten pro-se defendants. Stone clearly expected me to surrender quickly rather than attempt mounting a defense against such experienced commercial litigation attorneys. I contacted Marcus Webb hoping he could represent me, but our longtime family lawyer had recently retired due to serious health problems and couldn't take on new cases. Marcus recommended 3 other Portland attorneys, but their consultation meetings were discouraging. Each lawyer quoted fees between $50,000 and $75,000 for proper representation money I simply didn't have since everything was invested in bakery operations and building my legal practice. The first attorney, Robert Chang from Chang & Associates, reviewed Harrison's documents and shook his head grimly. "Your father has serious resources behind this challenge," he explained. "Stone is known for burying opponents in paperwork and procedural motions. Even if we ultimately prevail, the litigation costs could bankrupt you before we reach trial." The second attorney, Jennifer Walsh from Walsh Legal Services, was more optimistic but equally expensive. "We could fight this," she said, "but it would require extensive document analysis, expert witness testimony, and probably 18 months of litigation. My retainer alone would be $30,000, and total costs could easily exceed $60,000. The third attorney, Michael Rodriguez from Rodriguez & Partners, was honest about my prospects. "Harrison has hired Stone specifically because she's known for intimidating smaller opponents into settlements. Even if your mother's will is completely valid, the litigation process itself might force you to sell the bakery to pay legal fees." Meanwhile, Sweet Dream's community rallied around me with touching demonstrations of support. Mrs. Dorothy Thompson organized a legal defense fund going door to door throughout the neighborhood, collecting donations from people who remembered Elena's kindness. She raised $3,000 in small bills and coins from customers who wanted to help preserve the bakery that had meant so much to their lives. Tommy Garcia, now 16 years old, and more confident than the shy child Elena had tutored, created social media posts supporting my legal fight. His Facebook page and Instagram account featured dozens of photos showing Sweet Dream's role in neighborhood life. Pictures of birthday celebrations, community meetings, holiday gatherings, and quiet moments of connection that demonstrated the bakery's importance beyond simple commercial transactions. The Martinez family offered to testify about Elena's mental sharpness during her final months. They had visited regularly during her illness, bringing homemade soup and staying for long conversations about family, faith, and the future. Grandfather Miguel remembered Elena discussing detailed business plans and worrying about customer relationships during the transition period after her death. But Harrison's intimidation campaign escalated rapidly beyond simple legal proceedings. Process servers appeared at Sweet Dreams daily with new motions amendments and supplemental filings. Stone submitted requests for expedited hearings claiming I was damaging valuable commercial property through improper maintenance and unauthorized modifications to the building structure. Local television news picked up the story, portraying it as a classic David versus Goliath battle between a small business owner and his wealthy estranged father. The human interest coverage focused on Elena's community service legacy and the neighborhood's support for preserving Sweet Dreams, but it didn't address the complex legal issues that would ultimately determine the case's outcome. Harrison hired private investigator Jake Murphy to research my background and discovered my Harvard law degree and academic achievements. But instead of being concerned about my legal education, Harrison became more confident and arrogant. He believed my theoretical knowledge was worthless against experienced commercial litigation attorneys who had spent decades fighting similar cases. Harrison decided to humiliate me publicly in court planning, to demonstrate that book learning meant nothing when facing real-world legal warfare. He wanted to prove that his wealth and connections could overwhelm any opposition, even from his own son. The courtroom battle became personal for Harrison, an opportunity to assert dominance and justify his abandonment of our family years earlier. Stone filed motions challenging every aspect of Elena's will and inheritance planning. She claimed the witnesses were biased because they were bakery customers, argued the notarization was technically improper due to minor procedural variations, and suggested I had exercised undue influence over Elena during her vulnerable final months. Each motion required detailed written responses that consumed hours of research and preparation time. I spent sleepless nights in Sweet Dream's kitchen, surrounded by law books, borrowed from Portland State University's library, crafting arguments, while the aroma of Elena's recipes provided comfort during the most stressful period of my life. The psychological pressure was enormous. I was fighting to preserve my mother's legacy, while simultaneously trying to maintain daily bakery operations and serve regular customers who depended on Sweet Dreams for their morning coffee, afternoon treats, and social connections. The weight of responsibility felt crushing as I realized that losing this legal battle would destroy not only my inheritance, but also the community gathering place Elena had spent 25 years building. I made a strategic decision that would prove crucial to my eventual victory. Instead of revealing my legal background immediately, I chose to let Harrison and Stone underestimate my capabilities, while I quietly prepared a comprehensive defense strategy. My constitutional law professor at Harvard had taught us that the element of surprise often determined courtroom outcomes more than superior resources or experience. Late nights in Sweet Dream's kitchen became my law library. I surrounded myself with property law textbooks, inheritance dispute case studies, and document authentication procedures borrowed from Portland State University's legal collection. Elena's handwritten recipe cards watched over me from the walls as I researched every possible angle of Harrison's attack, drawing strength from her presence in the space we had shared. The deeper I investigated, the more sophisticated Harrison's scheme appeared. The transfer deed he presented looked professionally forged, complete with convincing paperwork trails and supporting documentation. Stone had clearly invested significant resources in creating a believable fraud that would fool casual observers and possibly even experienced attorneys who didn't examine the evidence closely. I reached out to Dr. Angela Foster, Elena's oncologist, during her final year. Dr. Foster remembered Elena clearly and agreed to review her medical records to provide expert testimony about Elena's mental state throughout her illness. "Your mother was one of my most mentally alert patients," Dr. Foster told me during our phone consultation. She asked detailed questions about treatment options, understood complex medical explanations, and remained cognitively sharp until her final day. Dr. Foster's records showed Elena discussing business succession plans during medical appointments, expressing concern about maintaining Sweet Dreams community relationships, and asking about how cancer treatments might affect her ability to work. These documented conversations proved Elena was thinking clearly about the future and making rational decisions about her estate planning. Notary Public Rachel Kim, who had witnessed Elena's will signing, provided detailed records of that session. Rachel remembered Elena as articulate and determined, asking questions about the legal language and insisting on understanding every clause before signing. Rachel's contemporaneous notes showed Elena arriving early, bringing identification documents, and spending over an hour carefully reviewing the will's contents. Meanwhile, I discovered Harrison had been secretly purchasing surrounding properties for months, assembling parcels for his luxury shopping complex development. Harrison Enterprises had acquired the auto repair shop next door, the small apartment building across the street, and 2 vacant lots on the adjacent block. Sweet Dreams occupied the centerpiece location that would make or break Harrison's entire development project. City planning documents revealed Harrison had already secured preliminary approvals for his shopping complex pending acquisition of my property as the development's anchor location. The proposed project included high-end retail stores, expensive restaurants, and luxury condominiums that would completely transform the neighborhood's character and price out longtime residents. The stress affected my physical and mental health significantly. I lost 15 pounds during the preparation period, developed chronic insomnia, and struggled to maintain Sweet Dreams' daily operations while researching legal defenses. Regular customers noticed my exhaustion but continued offering support in touching ways. Mrs. Dorothy Thompson brought homemade chicken soup every afternoon, sitting with me at the corner table while I reviewed legal documents and reminding me of Elena's strength during difficult times. "Your mother never gave up on anything important," Dorothy would say, patting my hand with her weathered fingers. "She fought cancer with more courage than I've ever seen, and she would be proud of how you're fighting for her legacy." Tommy Garcia volunteered to help with early morning baking preparation, arriving at 5:30 to mix dough and prep ingredients before school. His help allowed me to focus on legal research during evening hours when the bakery was closed. Tommy understood the stakes involved and took pride in contributing to Sweet Dreams' survival. I battled internal conflict about my legal approach throughout the preparation period. Harvard Law School had emphasized aggressive advocacy and thorough preparation, but Elena's gentler philosophy promoted understanding and compassion over confrontation. I wondered whether seeking a negotiated settlement might be wiser than risking everything in a courtroom battle against superior resources. Harrison's psychological warfare intensified as the hearing date approached. He appeared at Sweet Dreams during busy afternoon hours, loudly discussing development plans with associates, while customers tried to enjoy their coffee and pastries. He would point at different areas of the bakery while explaining how demolition and reconstruction would improve the property's commercial value. Harrison made increasingly generous offers to buy me out for token amounts, always in public settings designed to humiliate me in front of customers and neighbors. $20,000 is more than this place is worth, he announced during one particularly busy Saturday morning. You should take the money and find something more suitable to your abilities. Stone filed additional motions 3 days before the hearing claiming Elena's will. Witnesses were biased, the notarization contained technical defects, and I had exercised undue influence over my dying mother. Each new motion created additional stress and preparation requirements, while the clock ran down toward our court date. But my most significant discovery came during a late-night examination session at Portland State University's Geology Laboratory. While studying the transfer deed under high-powered magnification, I noticed something that could definitively prove Harrison's fraud. The paper contained modern security fibers that weren't commercially manufactured until 2 years after Elena's alleged signing date. The security fibers were microscopic polymer threads embedded in the paper during manufacturing to prevent counterfeiting and document forgery. These particular fibers included a unique chemical signature that forensic document examiners could identify and date precisely. Harrison's forged transfer deed contained anachronistic materials that would provide irrefutable evidence of document fraud. I realized this evidence needed to be presented strategically for maximum courtroom impact. Simply introducing the technical analysis early in the proceedings might allow Stone to create alternative explanations or challenge the testing procedures, but presenting it at the optimal moment could definitively expose Harrison's criminal conspiracy and ensure complete victory. The night before our hearing, I sat alone in Sweet Dream's kitchen surrounded by Elena's recipe cards and breathing in the lingering aromas of cinnamon vanilla and fresh bread that had comforted me throughout my childhood. I thought about Elena's courage. During her final months, her determination to preserve the community she had built, and her faith in my ability to honor her legacy. I made peace with my decision to conceal my legal education until the moment of maximum impact. Harrison expected to humiliate an amateur who was in over his head. Stone anticipated overwhelming an inexperienced opponent with superior resources and courtroom tactics. They would discover too late that they had underestimated both my capabilities and my determination to protect everything Elena had created. The Multnomah County Courthouse buzzed with unusual activity on the morning of our hearing. Harrison arrived in a black limousine, accompanied by an intimidating entourage that included Margaret Stone, 2 associate attorneys from her firm, a paralegal, carrying multiple briefcases, and a private court reporter hired to create transcripts for potential appeals. Harrison wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, paired with platinum cufflinks and a Swiss watch that gleamed under the courthouse's fluorescent lighting. He moved through the building like he owned it, nodding to court staff who recognized his wealth and status, projecting the confidence of someone who expected victory through superior resources. Stone commanded attention in her corner office power suit, carrying herself with the arrogance of an attorney who had never lost a case involving significantly fewer resources. She directed her associates like a general, preparing for battle organizing documents into precise stacks and reviewing tactical notes designed to overwhelm inexperienced opposition. I entered the courthouse alone, carrying Elena's worn leather briefcase that had accompanied her to every important business meeting throughout Sweet Dream's history. The briefcase contained my meticulously organized evidence witness statements and legal arguments, but it looked shabby compared to Stone's expensive litigation materials. My best suit purchased for law school interviews 5 years earlier now hung loose on my frame due to recent weight loss. I had polished my shoes and pressed my shirt carefully, but I still looked like someone who couldn't afford proper legal representation. Harrison's smug expression when he saw me suggested his confidence remained unshaken. Judge Patricia Coleman entered the courtroom with the bearing of someone who had presided over thousands of family law disputes during her 23-year career. Judge Coleman was known for thorough preparation, impatience with legal gamesmanship, and genuine concern for protecting family assets from exploitation. She observed the obvious disparity between the parties with interest rather than predetermined sympathy. The gallery filled with curious spectators, including several Sweet Dreams customers who had taken time off work to support me. Mrs. Dorothy Thompson sat in the front row, her hands folded in prayer. Tommy Garcia had convinced his high school to excuse him for educational purposes. The Martinez family occupied an entire bench, grandfather Miguel wearing his only suit and grandmother Rosa clutching a rosary. Stone delivered her opening statement with theatrical flair designed to establish dominance and intimidate. She cited dozens of property law precedents, referenced complex inheritance statutes, and painted Elena as a confused cancer patient who had been manipulated by her ambitious son during moments of vulnerability and fear. Your Honor, Stone proclaimed with practiced confidence, the evidence will show that Elena Williams was suffering from medication-induced confusion during her final months, making her susceptible to influence from individuals who stood to benefit financially from her compromised mental state. Mr. Cedric Williams has demonstrated a clear pattern of financial opportunism, using his mother's terminal illness to secure valuable real estate through emotional manipulation and systematic isolation from family members who might have provided objective guidance. Stone presented Harrison as a concerned father who had been prevented from maintaining contact with his terminally ill ex-wife, describing his sudden reappearance as a heroic attempt to honor Elena's true final wishes while protecting family assets from misappropriation by someone who had exploited a dying woman's trust. The authentic transfer deed clearly demonstrates Elena Williams's intention to restore this valuable commercial property to my client's ownership. Stone continued holding up the forged document like evidence of undisputed truth. Mr. Harrison Williams represents stability, financial resources, and legitimate business experience. His development plans will transform this underutilized property into a commercial asset that benefits the entire Portland community. Harrison nodded approvingly from the plaintiff's table, occasionally whispering comments loud enough for spectators to hear about my obvious desperation and amateur legal representation. He projected supreme confidence, clearly expecting Stone's reputation and resources to overwhelm any defense I might attempt. When Judge Coleman called for my opening statement, I felt every eye in the courtroom focusing on me with curiosity, sympathy, or skepticism. Harrison leaned back in his chair with anticipation, preparing to enjoy my public humiliation as vindication for his abandonment of our family 16 years earlier. I rose slowly from the defendant's table, taking time to button my jacket and organize my thoughts, while the courtroom waited in complete silence. I could feel Elena's presence in that moment, her voice, reminding me to stay true to my principles while fighting for justice with courage and dignity. I remembered Elena's final words about never letting anyone make me ashamed of who I was or where I came from. I thought about Sweet Dreams customers who had rallied around me, the community that depended on the bakery for more than just food, and the legacy Elena had entrusted to my care. The moment had come to reveal my true capabilities and begin dismantling Harrison's fraudulent scheme with surgical precision. I looked directly at Judge Coleman and began speaking in a quiet, measured tone that gradually filled the courtroom with unmistakable authority. Your Honor, I said, letting each word carry weight and significance, I am Cedric Williams, Harvard Law School class of 2019, summa cum laude graduate, former senior editor of the Harvard Law Review, and recipient of the Dean's Award for Excellence in Constitutional Law. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Stone's confident expression transformed into shock, then concern, then barely controlled panic. Harrison's smugness evaporated as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. Spectators leaned forward with sudden interest as they understood they were witnessing something completely unexpected. I have deliberately chosen to represent myself in this proceeding not from financial necessity, but from principle. I continued, my voice gaining strength with each sentence. I believe deeply that justice should not depend on the size of one's bank account or the prestige of one's law firm. And over the next several hours, I am going to demonstrate why my father's claim represents not merely an attempt at theft, but a criminal conspiracy involving document forgery fraud upon this court, and a systematic effort to steal my deceased mother's life work through manufactured evidence. Judge Coleman leaned forward with obvious fascination while court staff stopped their routine activities to listen. Stone frantically whispered with her associates, clearly unprepared for this development. Harrison's face reddened as he began to understand that his son possessed capabilities he had never imagined. Your Honor, I concluded the evidence will show that Elena Williams was mentally competent throughout her illness, that her estate planning was thorough and legally sound, and that the document presented by opposing counsel is a sophisticated forgery that can be definitively proven fraudulent through scientific analysis. Justice demands not only that this fraudulent claim be rejected, but that the perpetrators face appropriate consequences for their criminal conduct. The battle lines were drawn, and Harrison was beginning to realize he had seriously underestimated his opponent. The transformation in courtroom atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Spectators who had expected to witness David's defeat by Goliath suddenly realized they might be seeing David reveal he had been hiding a powerful slingshot all along. Judge Coleman's demeanor shifted from routine professionalism to genuine engagement as she recognized the unexpected sophistication of the case developing before her. I began my systematic destruction of Harrison's fraudulent case by establishing Elena's complete mental competency throughout her illness. I called Dr. Angela Foster as my first witness, connecting via video conference from her clinic, where she was treating patients. Dr. Foster, I began, you treated Elena Williams throughout her battle with pancreatic cancer. During your interactions with her, did you observe any signs of mental impairment, cognitive decline, or medication-induced confusion? Dr. Foster's response was immediate and definitive. Absolutely not. Elena Williams remained mentally sharp, cognitively intact, and emotionally stable throughout our entire treatment relationship. She asked detailed questions about her prognosis, understood complex treatment options, and made informed decisions about pain management and end-of-life care. I would have immediately documented any signs of cognitive impairment in her medical records, and no such documentation exists. Stone attempted to object, arguing that Dr. Foster's testimony was irrelevant to property law issues, but Judge Coleman allowed the testimony to continue. The court is very interested in establishing the decedent's mental state during the relevant time period, she ruled. I guided Dr. Foster through specific examples of Elena's mental acuity during her final months. Elena had researched alternative treatment options, independently asked about potential side effects of various medications, and discussed how different therapies might affect her ability to continue working at Sweet Dreams. These conversations demonstrated sophisticated reasoning and forward-thinking planning inconsistent with cognitive impairment. Dr. Foster and Trine. I continued, did Elena Williams ever mention concerns about business succession planning during your medical appointments? Yes, frequently, Dr. Foster replied. Elena was very worried about ensuring Sweet Dreams could continue serving the community after her death. She discussed her plans for transferring ownership training staff and maintaining customer relationships. These conversations showed her thinking clearly about complex business issues and long-term consequences. Next, I called Rachel Kim, the notary public who had witnessed Elena's will signing. Rachel's testimony established the meticulous care Elena had taken throughout the estate planning process. Ms. Kim, I asked, please describe Elena Williams' demeanor and behavior during the will signing session. Elena was extremely thorough and careful, Rachel testified. She arrived early, brought multiple forms of identification, and spent over an hour reviewing every clause of the will. She asked questions about specific language, requested explanations of legal terminology, and made sure she understood the implications of every provision. She was clearly mentally competent and acting voluntarily. Rachel's contemporaneous notes showed Elena discussing her hopes for Sweet Dream's future, expressing concern about maintaining the bakery's community focus, and emphasizing the importance of preserving relationships with longtime customers. These detailed records contradicted any suggestion of mental impairment or undue influence. But my most devastating evidence came when I introduced the scientific proof of document forgery. I called Professor David Chen from Portland State University's Forensic Science Department as an expert witness in document authentication. Professor Chen, I began, you conducted microscopic analysis of the transfer deed presented by plaintiff's counsel. What did your examination reveal? Professor Chen's testimony was methodical and damning. The document contains polymer security fibers that were not commercially available until late 2022. Since the transfer deed is dated May 2021, it is physically impossible for the document to be authentic. The paper's composition provides irrefutable proof that the document was created after the alleged signing date. Stone jumped to her feet with obvious desperation. Objection. This testimony assumes facts, not an evidence, and exceeds the scope of expert qualification. Judge Coleman's response was sharp and dismissive. Overruled Counselor Stone. The court finds Professor Chen's credentials and methodology completely acceptable. Please continue, Mr. Williams. I guided Professor Chen through the technical details of security fiber analysis, explaining how modern anti-counterfeiting measures made document dating scientifically precise. The polymer fibers contained unique chemical signatures that forensic examiners could identify and date within narrow time frames, providing irrefutable evidence of when the paper was manufactured. Harrison's face grew increasingly pale as he realized the scope of his legal exposure. What had begun as a civil property dispute was rapidly becoming evidence of criminal fraud that could result in federal charges and significant prison time. But my most shocking revelation was yet to come. I had discovered through careful investigation that Margaret Stone herself had a documented history of ethical violations that should have been disclosed to the court. Your Honor, I announced, I move to introduce evidence that opposing counsel Margaret Stone was previously sanctioned by the Oregon State Bar for document fabrication in an unrelated case 5 years ago, information that should have been disclosed during these proceedings. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs as spectators realized the implications. Stone leaped to her feet with obvious panic. Objection. This is character assassination and completely irrelevant to the current proceedings. Judge Coleman's expression hardened as she considered the implications. Overruled Counselor Stone. The court is extremely interested in this information, and your failure to disclose prior sanctions raises serious questions about your conduct in this case. I presented documentation of Stone's previous ethical violation, which involved fabricating witness statements in a commercial litigation matter. The Oregon State Bar had imposed a 6-month suspension and required Stone to complete ethics training sanctions that should have been disclosed when she appeared before Judge Coleman. Harrison's confidence completely evaporated as he understood that his expensive legal team had not only failed to properly investigate my background, but had also concealed information that undermined their credibility with the court. He began whispering urgently with Stone, clearly demanding explanations for the strategic failures that were destroying his case. My final revelation stunned everyone in the courtroom, including Harrison himself. Through a carefully crafted subpoena, I had obtained recordings that Harrison had secretly made of his conversations with Stone about the document fabrication plan. Your Honor, I continued, I have obtained audio recordings in which Mr. Harrison Williams and Ms. Stone discuss the creation of fraudulent documents for use in these proceedings. These recordings were made by Mr. Williams himself, apparently, for the purpose of blackmailing his attorney into reducing legal fees after achieving victory through fraudulent means. The courtroom fell into shocked silence as I played excerpts of Harrison's own voice, discussing the transfer deed forgery, expressing confidence that I would be unable to expose the fraud, and planning to use evidence of Stone's ethical violations as leverage for fee negotiations. Harrison's face turned ashen as he heard his own words played back in open court, providing undeniable evidence of criminal conspiracy and intent to defraud. Stone appeared on the verge of collapse, realizing that her client had secretly recorded their privileged communications and was prepared to use those recordings against her. Judge Coleman's expression reflected barely controlled anger as she processed the evidence of systematic fraud being perpetrated in her courtroom. "Mr. Williams," she said, addressing me with new respect, "this evidence raises extremely serious questions that extend far beyond the scope of this property dispute." The foundation of Harrison's case had not merely collapsed, but had been revealed as an elaborate criminal conspiracy that threatened the integrity of the entire legal system. Harrison was beginning to understand that his attempt to steal Elena's legacy might cost him everything he had built during his years of abandoning our family. Judge Coleman called a 30-minute recess to review the devastating evidence I had presented, during which the courtroom atmosphere remained electric with tension and anticipation. Harrison and Stone huddled together in urgent whispered conferences while I organized my closing materials with calm confidence, drawing strength from knowing Elena would be proud of how I had fought for her legacy. Mrs. Dorothy Thompson squeezed my hand as spectators filed out for the break. "Your mother is watching over you," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "She would be so proud of the man you've become and how you're honoring her memory." Tommy Garcia approached with obvious admiration. "That was incredible," he said. "I never knew you were such an amazing lawyer. Elena always said you were brilliant, but this is beyond anything I imagined." When court resumed, Judge Coleman's demeanor reflected barely controlled fury at the attempt to perpetrate fraud in her courtroom. "In 23 years on this bench," she began, her voice carrying unmistakable authority, "I have rarely encountered such a blatant and systematic attempt to defraud the court system through fabricated evidence and concealed ethical violations." Stone attempted desperate damage control, rising with obvious nervousness. "Your Honor, any irregularities in the documentation presented were completely unintentional oversights. My client's claim remains fundamentally valid based on alternative legal theories of property recovery, and we respectfully request the opportunity to present additional evidence supporting our position." Judge Coleman cut her off with surgical precision. "Counselor Stone, you are dangerously close to compounding your ethical violations through continued misrepresentations to this court. I strongly suggest you remain silent unless directly questioned about your conduct in this matter." I delivered my closing argument with quiet passion, speaking directly about Elena's legacy and Sweet Dream's irreplaceable role in our community. I introduced written testimonials from dozens of customers describing how the bakery had been a gathering place for celebrations, a source of comfort during difficult times, and a consistent source of support for struggling families. "Your Honor," I said, looking directly at Judge Coleman, "this case represents far more than a simple property ownership dispute. It's about honoring a woman who dedicated her entire adult life to serving others, building something meaningful from nothing, and creating a legacy of community service that has touched hundreds of lives over 25 years. I called Mrs. Dorothy Thompson to testify about Elena's extraordinary kindness during her husband's terminal illness. Dorothy described how Elena had delivered fresh meals to their house every day for 3 weeks, refused any payment despite their attempts to compensate her, and insisted that helping neighbors during crisis was simply what decent people did for each other. "Elena never made me feel like charity," Dorothy testified through tears. "She treated me like family, like someone who mattered. She listened to my stories about Frank, remembered our anniversary dates, and helped me learn to live alone with dignity and purpose. Without sweet dreams, I would have had nowhere to go and no one who cared. Tommy Garcia took the witness stand with newfound confidence, describing how Elena had tutored him through middle school mathematics, while he helped with afternoon cleanup duties. Elena had never charged for the tutoring, instead treating it as a natural extension of Sweet Dreams' community service mission. Elena believed in me when my grades were terrible, and my parents were too busy working to help with homework, Tommy testified. She taught me that intelligence comes in many forms, and that everyone deserves encouragement to reach their potential. Because of her support, I'm graduating high school with honors and planning to study business administration in college. Against Stone's strong advice, Harrison demanded to testify on his own behalf, believing his business success and financial resources would impress Judge Coleman. His arrogance had survived even the devastating exposure of his fraudulent scheme, and he remained convinced that wealth and status could overcome any legal obstacles. Under my cross-examination, Harrison revealed the depth of his contempt for Elena's life work and his complete lack of understanding about community values. "That bakery sits on $1 million piece of commercial real estate," he declared with obvious frustration. "Elena wasted its potential with her little hobby business when she could have developed something substantial, something that actually mattered to Portland's economic growth. So my mother's 25 years of community service didn't matter," I asked quietly, giving Harrison the opportunity to demonstrate his character to Judge Coleman and the courtroom spectators. "Community service doesn't pay property taxes or create significant employment opportunities," Harrison snapped, immediately realizing his error, as audible gasps echoed through the gallery. "I'm trying to build something important here, something that contributes to real economic development instead of just selling cookies to old ladies." Harrison's testimony revealed him as someone who measured value exclusively in financial terms, who saw Elena's community relationships as worthless sentimentality, and who viewed Sweet Dreams as nothing more than an obstacle to his commercial ambitions. His words provided the perfect contrast to Elena's legacy of service and compassion. Judge Coleman's ruling was swift and comprehensive. The court finds overwhelming evidence of document fraud conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and serious ethical violations by opposing counsel, she declared. The plaintiff's claim is not only completely without merit, but represents a criminal conspiracy that will be referred immediately to the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office for prosecution. Judge Coleman ordered Harrison to pay compensatory damages for my legal costs, emotional distress, and business disruption during the litigation period. She froze Harrison's assets pending criminal investigation and issued a comprehensive restraining order preventing him from contacting me or approaching Sweet Dreams property. "Mr. Harrison Williams," Judge Coleman continued, "your conduct in this matter represents a fundamental betrayal of family relationships, an abuse of the legal system, and a callous disregard for community values. The court finds your testimony revealing of character defects that explain why your family relationships failed so catastrophically." But Judge Coleman's most significant ruling addressed the broader implications of Harrison's criminal behavior. She ordered a complete investigation of Harrison Enterprises' other property acquisitions, suspecting that similar fraud might have been used against other vulnerable property owners throughout Portland. "The court has reason to believe this fraudulent scheme may extend beyond the current case," Judge Coleman announced. "Law enforcement agencies will investigate whether other property owners have been victimized through similar document forgery and legal intimidation tactics." Harrison's face reflected the dawning realization that his attempt to steal Elena's bakery had triggered a comprehensive investigation that threatened his entire business empire. What had begun as an arrogant assault on his abandoned son's inheritance had become a legal and financial disaster that could destroy everything he had built during 16 years of pursuing wealth over family. Stone faced immediate Oregon State Bar complaints and potential criminal charges for her role in the document forgery conspiracy. Her legal career was effectively finished, and she faced possible disbarment and prison time for violating the most fundamental ethical obligations of the legal profession. As court officials led Harrison away to begin processing criminal charges, he looked back at me with something that might have been regret, or perhaps simply anger, at being outmaneuvered by the son he had abandoned and underestimated. Either way, Elena's legacy was safe, and Sweet Dreams would continue serving the community she had loved so much. 6 months after Judge Coleman's devastating ruling, Sweet Dreams Bakery was thriving beyond anything Elena had ever imagined during her lifetime. The intense media coverage of our legal battle had generated enormous community support, bringing new customers who wanted to support the small business that had courageously stood up to corporate bullying and family betrayal. Portland food bloggers wrote enthusiastic reviews celebrating Sweet Dreams' authentic community atmosphere and Elena's time-tested recipes. Local television stations featured human interest stories about the bakery's role in neighborhood life, highlighting customers like Mrs. Dorothy Thompson and Tommy Garcia, whose lives had been transformed by Elena's kindness and support. New customers arrived daily, drawn by curiosity about the bakery that had defeated a billionaire's fraudulent lawsuit, but staying because they discovered genuine warmth and exceptional food in an authentic community gathering place. Sweet Dreams revenue increased by 40% during the 6 months following the trial, enabling me to hire additional staff and expand our community service programs. I successfully integrated my legal practice with Sweet Dreams operations, creating a unique business model that honored Elena's community-focused philosophy while utilizing my legal education to help other small business owners. Morning hours were dedicated to legal consultations and document preparation, while afternoons were spent maintaining Elena's baking traditions and customer relationships. My legal practice specialized in representing small business owners facing harassment from larger corporations, landlord disputes, and regulatory challenges. Word spread quickly through Portland's entrepreneurial community that Sweet Dreams offered affordable legal services from someone who understood the pressures facing independent business owners. Many clients paid through barter arrangements, bringing fresh produce, handcrafted goods, or professional services in exchange for legal representation. Mrs. Dorothy Thompson had become Sweet Dreams' unofficial grandmother figure, arriving every morning at 7:30 to help organize community events and maintain Elena's traditions of supporting struggling families. Dorothy coordinated holiday food drives, organized birthday celebrations for elderly customers who had no family, and served as a bridge between longtime customers and newcomers who were discovering Sweet Dreams' unique atmosphere. Tommy Garcia was preparing for college with a partial scholarship to Portland State University's Business Administration program. He continued working part-time at Sweet Dreams, learning every aspect of bakery operations, while developing business plans for expanding our community outreach programs. Tommy's transformation from a shy, struggling middle school student to a confident young adult exemplified Elena's belief in encouraging everyone to reach their potential. The Martinez family had established Sweet Dreams as their extended family headquarters, celebrating every significant life event in the bakery's warm atmosphere. Grandfather Miguel recovered fully from his heart surgery and returned to his daily coffee routine, often bringing friends to experience Elena's recipes and the welcoming community Elena had created. Harrison faced serious federal fraud charges and multiple Oregon State Bar complaints that resulted in comprehensive investigations of his business practices. Federal prosecutors discovered that Harrison Enterprises had used similar document forgery schemes to acquire at least 6 other properties throughout Portland, victimizing elderly property owners and small business operators who lacked resources to fight sophisticated legal challenges. Harrison's shopping complex development project collapsed completely when city planning officials revoked all permits pending resolution of the criminal investigations. Properties he had acquired through fraudulent means were returned to their rightful owners, and Harrison faced potential prison sentences that could keep him incarcerated for decades. Margaret Stone was disbarred by the Oregon State Bar and faced federal criminal charges for her role in the document forgery conspiracy. Stone Richards and Associates dissolved as a law firm when other partners discovered the extent of Stone's ethical violations and criminal conduct. Several of the firm's previous cases were reopened for investigation of potential fraud. The experience taught me profound lessons about family community and the true meaning of success. I learned that strength doesn't come from abandoning your values under pressure, but from finding ways to honor your principles while fighting effectively for justice. Elena's gentleness and my legal training weren't contradictory approaches, but complementary tools for solving problems and serving others. I established the Elena Williams Memorial Scholarship Fund to support single mothers pursuing educational opportunities while raising children alone. The scholarship provided financial assistance and mentoring support, recognizing that Elena's success had been possible only because community members had helped her during difficult times. Sweet Dreams expanded its community programs to include free business consultation services for aspiring entrepreneurs and monthly financial literacy workshops for neighborhood residents. We partnered with Portland Community College to offer small business development courses in the bakery's meeting room, creating opportunities for people to learn practical skills in a supportive environment. The most surprising development came 8 months after the trial when Harrison contacted me through intermediaries requesting a private meeting to discuss his conduct and its consequences. Our conversation took place at a neutral location downtown, with both of us accompanied by attorneys to ensure appropriate boundaries. Harrison looked older and more tired than I remembered, his arrogance replaced by what appeared to be genuine remorse for the pain he had caused our family. "I never understood what Elena built here," he admitted quietly, "and I never appreciated the man you've become despite my failures as a father, While I couldn't forgive Harrison immediately for abandoning our family and attempting to steal Elena's legacy, I recognized his attempt at accountability as meaningful progress. We agreed to extremely limited supervised contact focused on Harrison making amends through community service, rather than seeking personal reconciliation with me. Harrison began volunteering at Portland homeless shelters and food banks as part of his plea agreement with federal prosecutors. His financial resources, properly directed toward community service, created opportunities to help vulnerable populations in ways that honored Elena's philosophy of supporting people during their most difficult moments. Elena's legacy lived on not through property ownership or financial assets, but through the community relationships she had nurtured and the values she had instilled in everyone who knew her. Sweet Dreams remained a gathering place where people found comfort, connection, and support during life's challenges and celebrations. Standing in the bakery's kitchen each morning, surrounded by the aroma of fresh bread and the warmth of customer conversations, I understood that Elena's true inheritance was not the building or the business, but the capacity to create meaningful relationships and contribute positively to other people's lives. The bakery's new motto, displayed prominently behind the counter where everyone could see it, captured Elena's philosophy perfectly. Sweet dreams rise from love, hard work, and never giving up. Regular customers often paused to read those words and smile, understanding that they represented more than marketing language but fundamental principles for building a meaningful life. Every morning, I placed a single blueberry muffin beside Elena's photograph near the register, maintaining her presence in the space she had loved so deeply. Customers noticed this small ritual and often shared their own memories of Elena's kindness, creating moments of connection that honored her memory while strengthening the community bonds she had worked so hard to build. My legal victory had preserved Elena's physical legacy, but my daily choices to maintain her values of service, compassion, and community support ensured that her true legacy would continue growing and touching new lives for generations to come. The courtroom battle had taught me that real success isn't measured by wealth status or professional achievements, but by the positive impact you create in other people's lives and the values you uphold when facing pressure to compromise your principles. Elena's example showed me that ordinary people can create extraordinary legacies through consistent acts of kindness, unwavering integrity, and genuine care for others' well-being. Sweet Dreams continued thriving as Portland's most authentic community bakery, proving that businesses built on genuine relationships and service to others can compete successfully against corporate developments that prioritize profit over people. Elena's vision of creating a gathering place where everyone felt valued and supported had not only survived Harrison's assault, but had grown stronger through the community's rallying support. As I watched customers enjoy Elena's recipes, share life updates with longtime friends, and welcome newcomers into our extended family, I knew that my mother's most important dreams had become permanent realities that would outlast any legal documents, property deeds, or business plans. What challenges have you faced in standing up for what you believe is right? And how did you find the strength to keep fighting for your principles? Your story might inspire others who are facing their own battles for justice and family legacy. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful. If you would like this video, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges, and share this with someone who might need encouragement to never give up on what matters most. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your values and family legacy are worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the opposition might seem.